Everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. I'm Rabia Salim, Executive Vice President of PMI Karachi, Pakistan chapter. Today, I welcome you all at the 16th episode of our Readers Club and a very special segment of Meet the Author. We have started this journey of Readers Club in April 2020. Till date, it has enabled us to reach out to participants from 46 different countries and speakers from 13 different countries till now. Although we started this journey with book reading and sharing, but today we are really glad that we are having the author themselves presenting their books on our KPC platform. By having them and attendees from diversified background, it has enabled our chapter to build a community at our platform KPC from across the world. Today, our chapter is really very honored to have the author of the book himself, Mr. Jamal Al-Ali, who will be discussing his book, Project Janitor, Cleaning Other Project Managers' Mess. Very important. Jamal Al-Ali, MBA, PMP, CSM, SCM, is a professor, published author, consultant, speaker, and project manager with over 20 years of well-rounded success record in managing large and complex transition and transformation projects. He specializes in helping senior management deliver large and complex IT projects across various industries, resulting in a broad organizational change with a great value and significant savings. Jamal worked on various project management consultant engagements for some of the most respected financial institutions and organizations in North America. He has introduced adaptive and hybrid practices to his organization to transform project delivery practices from waterfall project management methodology as required. Jamal has authored many books and courses in project management available in Canada, US, UK, Europe, and other countries. They include Project Janitor 2018, You Are Unstoppable 2020, PMP Exam Questions 2018, Project Recovery Course for Ryerson University 2018. He has taught at Ryerson University since 2013. Besides, he is a professor at Humber Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning since 2020. Before that, Jamal was a corporate technical trainer, course author, and senior instructor at Trios College and FutureLink. He taught many students and attained an all-time top instructor ranking. Jamal is a PMP, Certified Scrum Master and trainer. He holds an MBA from Athabasca University in Alberta and currently working on his Doctor of Business Administration degree. Jamal is currently a volunteer senior project manager with Project Managers Without Borders. In addition to this entire inspirational brief that we have just heard, I had a pleasure of having this conversation with him yesterday, and I figured him out the utmost and the most positive person one could ever listen to. So with this profound happiness and glad, I welcome you all with Jamal. And Jamal, the stage is all yours.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say anything after everything else you said. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I just want to say one thing. I wouldn't have been able to achieve anything at all from what you have said without the help of so many people. So this is what I would like to start with, to say that I haven't really done any of that without so many wonderful people around me. So thanks to them all. I don't want to mention names because I don't want to forget any names here. Good morning, everybody. And it is my extreme pleasure to be with you and share some of my experiences and the book that I wrote about project recovery, titled Project Janitor. I just want to make sure, first of all, that everybody is able to hear me clearly and is able to see the slide as well in front of me. Perfect. Okay. So this is basically the title, and thank you so much for the Project Management Institute chapter in Karachi, Pakistan, for inviting me, and I really, really appreciate this opportunity. All right, so let's move on and start basically to dive in. And this is just, I really don't need to go through this anymore because I think you've done a great job there. Thank you so much. Basically, this is the agenda of today. And like, I don't like to read the agenda one item at a time because we are diving into each one of them. So I think we should move ahead and start to look. So first of all, there is always this debate about what is a successful project and what is a failed project, right? And I'm referring here to a big authority in project management, Harold Kurtzner, in 2014, where he basically defined project success as completing the requirements within the project constraints. And as we see here, the project constraints would be time, cost, scope, risk, resources, and quality. And he defined project failure as the reverse of that, meaning I haven't been able to deliver the project meeting requirements, cost, time, scope, risk, resources, and quality. So it's like the reverse coin of that. And that's fine. But I think that is also a bit debatable, right? Meaning, what if you actually deliver everything to the constraints, but you're working on a time to market project and you deliver the project to all these things, but now it has no value. It adds no value to the organization. Was that a good exercise with no value, with no benefit? Or so you see how the debate spins from there. But anyways, I think that's important to start with that. And again, building on that, characteristics of successful projects. As we said, they are completed within these constraints. But most importantly, as you can see, starts with the points below. Meeting the organizational intent, because you would hope that this is not a pet project. And just to make sure I'm not using any terminology that might not be shared with everybody, a pet project is basically if you're working with, and I actually had that experience where I was working for an SVP once in one of the major banks here in Canada, and he had some money aside, and he just wanted to do a project that would make him look good, okay? And that's really what I would define a pet project, beside other definitions. But delivering the expected business benefits to the organization, that's where it all starts, right? And also delivering a product that can be used by the user. And at the end, getting to the product team satisfaction. So talking about defining successful project, failed project, characteristics of successful projects, and then characteristics of failing projects are all reasons behind me writing this book, Project Janitor, cleaning other managers' mess, because I've experienced all those things. For example, looking at the characteristics of failing projects, and I would like to think that most of you have either experienced these things or have seen them, being experienced by fellow project managers, maybe in the same organization or in other organizations. Lack of methodology, which includes planning, budgeting, governance, you know, lack of sponsor and stakeholder support. Uh, what about the team that you are working with? They are basically defined as dysfunctional, and your resources are just going through a revolving door. You have so many turnovers here. And communications, which we considered in project management, well, we can always consider in project manager as one of the most important pillars. uh, in failing projects, you will find that there is hardly any communications. Uh, and then we have also the gold plating or scope creep. So many unauthorized scope changes that you get to a point where you don't know anymore what you are delivering. And then risk and quality management, uh, budget, schedule slippage. So you notice when you look at this slide, you go like, but Jamal, these are like common sense. Well, unfortunately, you will be surprised how many times common sense is so difficult to either have or advocate for or even work with. And that is sadly, why certain, things happen. So again, I just remind you one more time, the reason behind the book was having gone through all these things that I have shared with you so far uh, in a couple of banks here, and that drove me basically to think, okay, I mean, why do we keep doing these things? And what you can see here is basically trying to summarize as to why do projects fail. And we mentioned some of these items when we talked about characteristics of failed projects or failing projects. Um, and you can see here, in addition to the lack of sponsor and stakeholder support, the flawed project management plan and business case, you have basically poor to no risk management plan, mismatched or lack of resources. You might think, okay, well, we're repeating a little bit of what we said. Yes, we are probably repeating some of that, but because it's so important and it's so like it seems so easy to not to have to experience it. Yet we do experience that, right? Now, if we look at technology challenges, sometimes this might be actually unfair to label a project as a failure because of bad work or flaws. If we are, for example, working with like a cutting edge technology and we are a very you know um frontier, or we are a very, an organization that likes always to work with the latest and greatest, then it's fine. But as long as we are aware of that. But then we add to the list the politics, right? Internal politics, for example, or sometimes external politics, depending on the project and the stakeholders. If the stakeholders are all internal to the organization, then we have the internal politics, which is actually cancerous sometimes, and we can't really ignore that. Hopefully, you are not experiencing something like this in your organization, but it's really very hard because politics are, to a great degree, part of the human nature, where, for example, certain executives, VPs, SVPs, or even higher, they have a certain agenda that gives them a roadmap how to shine in this organization and get more and more promoted. And for them, if they have to work with your organization, with your department, with your business unit, I mean here, okay, and see that you are, for example, working on a project that will make the VP or the SVP or that business unit shine, they might consider you a danger for them, right? And and they may actually try to sabotage your work, and that is actually something that has happened in the past, unfortunately, uh, and something that we need to make sure that we take very seriously. I don't want to dive into how we deal with it at this moment, but there are ways that we can try to deal with it. There is no guarantee that we will be all the time successful dealing with internal politics. When it comes to external politics, here what I'm talking about is basically if your stakeholders go beyond your organization, you're basically working on a project that involves maybe some government departments, some other organizations outside your organization, and because of the politics, certain stakeholders outside might have a huge interest to make sure that you fail. So we have to take all these conditions or elements into consideration. So now you've listened to me through like maybe 5 or 6 slides, and you go like, "Come on, Jamal. I mean, there should be other important things in the project management world that we should care about. Why should we care about what you're saying here? I mean, yeah, okay, you're telling us some information. Sure, it's good to know. Yeah, bring some deja vu's. Yeah, we remember, politics. We remember resource turnover. Yeah, we experienced that. Why should we care? Well, there are many, many reasons, in my opinion, why we should care. Okay, about that. And and as you can see here, the impact goes beyond just a project or a project team or a project management office or even a portfolio or an organization. And notice here how I went into like steps, like I said, project or program or a portfolio or the whole organization. This goes beyond that. Okay, this goes into the society, into other areas as well. So without delaying this point, just let's look at here, right? There's a lot of research out there, whether it's the chaos report or other academic research that shows that project failure is still a big issue. And for example, in 2015, and I'm looking here at the chaos report from 2016, and please don't mind that some of this information is about a few years old. Not a lot, sadly, have changed in these few years. If, for example, we are 1% better or 2% better, but if we are still saying that 71% of the projects failed or were challenged, and only 29 were on time and on budget, I mean, okay, that's a huge amount, okay? That's a huge amount. And if you can see here in 2010, that's the third bullet point, a 2010 research suggests that an average large IT projects run 45% over budget and 7 are over time. 56%, they basically deliver less value than predicted. And as we all know, in project management, starting from the business case, okay, we have to tell the organization, please allow us to do this project, please approve this project and approve the budget because we need the money and you will give us the money. And this is the value that we are delivering to your organization. And in some projects, we also create, the benefits management plan, where we actually slice and dice the benefits to the project deliverables, milestones, if you want. And we show as we progress in the project, we show the benefit coming in slowly, right? This is how much we scrutinize the benefits. So in this case, when we say 50% or 56% delivered less value, that's a big amount. And look at, for example, the last part. In total, these projects had a cost overrun of $66 billion, which is more than the GDP of Luxembourg. And Luxembourg is a country in Europe. So, but this is how much money is involved, 66 billion. And the last bullet point here is talking about the PricewaterhouseCoopers that suggests that global capital project and infrastructure spending is set to grow to more than $9 trillion annually by 2025. So there's a lot of money involved here. And if projects continue to fail, there are a lot of money that's being wasted. And looking further here at some other, for example, in Canada, the total value of industrial mega projects is around $715 billion, and most of them are at risk and are fragile. And that's a lot of money involved as well. And please don't get tired because I'm sharing so much money that is at risk. And don't think that I'm only looking at the half empty glass. I'm not doing that. I have to just look at the facts that amplify the importance of delivering projects successfully as much as we can. The second point here, talking about the value of the 10 most expensive infrastructure projects in the US, which is $132 billion. I mean, think about it. There are countries in the world where people probably barely make $10 a day, okay? And actually sometimes less than that. Sometimes actually people make about $30 a month maybe, or something like that. And now you look at such big amounts, $132 billion for the 10 most expensive infrastructure projects. Like, there's a huge amount of money involved in there. I'm going to skip and go to the last 2 points. There are also positive impacts of the project success on organizations, and we will talk about that in a minute. But there are also negative impacts of project failure on organizations, which go beyond the monetary value. Okay, I understand the monetary value is very important, and I've been actually talking, in these couple of slides about it a lot. But there are also other positive and negative impacts that we need to understand as well, and we will talk about them shortly. And this is just another view of the case report from 2016. And it shows you that between 2011 and 2015, okay, for example, successful project percentage stayed the same. Okay, it went up a little bit in 2013, and then it went down, and at 2015 came back to be the same. The challenged projects, unfortunately, went from 49% in 2011 to 52% in 2015. So there was a little bit of change here, but it's really not significant, right? And the same goes for the failed projects. And again, I apologize if I harp on a certain points here. What I'm sharing with you today is not an invitation to be pessimistic or to have a grim face, or no, absolutely not. Uh, uh, as we know, okay, among the initial steps of problem solving is to acknowledge that there's a problem, okay, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to look at all these figures and acknowledge that there is a problem out there, so we can then start basically looking at ways to address this. When it comes to delivering large-scale IT projects, here we're talking about research conducted by McKinsey in 2010, and it's talking about basically half of all large IT projects massively blow their budgets, and we're talking about huge amounts of money. And the other point that I want to mention here is the third point, where we have software projects, for example, running the highest risk of cost and schedule overrun. I think the other point here at the end, it is best repeating what we have said earlier. And again, focusing here on large-scale IT projects. So in IT, there is a lot of spending as well, and it's simply an ongoing journey that we have, whether it is, for example, working on legacy environments that have existed forever, or whether it is a new transformation that the organization would like to do, going from one technology to the other. For example, the cloud computing, okay, that has been going on forever now, but it has picked up pace quite a lot in the last few years. And yesterday, I think, or the day before, there was an announcement from Microsoft about a new partnership with CIBC, where Microsoft Azure is basically the sole cloud solution that CIBC is using, and they've been using it for quite a bit now. But now there's like a more focused effort, and the announcement was made yesterday by the president of Microsoft himself, and CIBC responded to that. Actually, the SVP of CIBC responded to that by supporting it and saying, yeah, we are actually excited and looking. So just imagine how much such a transformation of the whole of CIBC infrastructure, technology, and application, everything else, for example, and I'm making an assumption that this is the scope, but how that actually will work with this huge mega scale IT project that CIBC has been working on for quite a while, I know, but how this will add, right? So this just gives you an idea. And we're not saying that this, only applies to large-scale IT projects, but this applies to many other projects. I'll give you just a quick example. For a few years now, okay, there was a big project, an oil project, okay, starting in Alberta, and basically this project was supposed to connect Alberta with the United States. And it was supposed to go through a lot of land that belongs to the indigenous people of Canada. And there was a lot of demonstrations, a lot of problems and objections and so on and so on. And what the government did, unfortunately, a few years ago is they basically they paid billions of dollars to buy the ownership of the old pipe that existed partly but needed a lot of work. And unfortunately, a few months ago, I think well, once Biden came became a president, he basically scrapped the project. He said, "No, we're not doing this." So the project died from the U.S. And then the government of Canada also decided that, okay, let's close the books on this. So now think about the billions of dollars, okay, that were wasted. And we are in 2021. So if I show you um, the chaos report from 2016, and then I'm telling you about billions of dollars that were wasted recently, I mean, it's sadly, it's an ongoing story. And then we should stop for a second and ask, so can we hold people accountable? And the sad answer is, Jamal, please go away. That's how it ends, sadly, right? And that's why people, in many cases, don't think about accountability when they are the cause in one way or another, direct or indirectly. They are the cause of project failures, right? Um, I think we can look at this one more time. Just talking about numbers, and I understand from the chapter that you will actually have access to this presentation, so you can look at these numbers on your own. Which again, now we are basically cutting these things, into oil, natural gas, and mining. Okay, let's look briefly here at what happened, for example, in the last 2 years because of COVID and the oil prices, right? And we know that uh, uh, countries depend on certain countries, many countries, especially, for example, if you go to the Gulf area, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and other countries that rely heavily on oil for their income. I mean, during these 2 years for COVID and what the oil prices went through, and then the income that went down, what happened to many of these projects, for example, whether they were national projects or whatever other projects, for example, or oil projects for that matter, right? What happened to these projects, for example? Either they were canceled completely or delayed or the scope was slashed down or whatever. And now, this morning, actually, I was looking at an article which was talking about that what we are going to experience very soon could potentially the last boom in oil prices. Okay, so let's assume that this happens and then the oil prices double or triple, for example. Then there will be more income. So how does this play out for project success and project failure, and how organizations or governments are making decisions? So we have to, and I always believe as a project manager, our knowledge should not be limited just to the PMP knowledge, the PMBOK knowledge, and just whatever is related to project management. I don't think that's actually enough. I think we need to be always well-rounded. I'm not calling for us to become specialists, absolutely not. Jack of all trades as a project manager, I'm so sorry, maybe I will disappoint some here, doesn't work, okay? It doesn't work. You need to be a project manager, well-rounded in your project management practice, but also knowledgeable to a minimum degree at least in so many other topics, so you can understand and make the right decisions. And this is another list of projects, expensive infrastructure projects in the United States, and they are actually distributed among um, many states. Now, let's come into the negative impact, for example, of failed projects on the organization itself, right? Now, I would like to think that none of us here today, whether we were project managers or otherwise, want to be associated with any failed project, okay? I think there are some and I have seen this actually in 2008. Okay, I was working with another. I was working in a project management office in a bank here in Canada, and I do apologize. I don't mention the bank names out of courtesy and respect, and also out of confidentiality, respecting the bank's confidentiality, really. But if anyone looks at my LinkedIn profile, you can, just put one and one together, and you could probably know what I'm talking about. But anyways, for now. So and I, and there was another project manager who was kind of cornered into taking on a project, and he was not feeling well about it at all. And within like 2 weeks approximately, he came forward and talked to our senior director and said to her, "I am so sorry, and I hope you understand, but I want to come off this project." And she asked him what was the reason, and he said, "I don't feel I have the elements, the conditions to basically deliver this project successfully. This project needs a lot of work before we even declare it as a project." And he removed himself from the project. So failure, embarrassment, and implications here, whether it's to the project sponsor or the project manager, that's something we need to take into account. Then there are legal, financial, and reputational implications. For example, if you, and specifically I'm talking here about a financial institution, but it could go beyond that. Okay, if, for example, you announce a big program in your organization, and you also share the benefits of this program with your organization, and you advertise it, and you have road shows within your organization, or if you actually have this program impacting stakeholders outside your organization, and then you advertise outside your organization. Maybe, for example, you're a customer, sorry, you're a bank, and you're advertising a project that will allow your bank clients to have a certain functionality, maybe to be able to deposit checks, using an application. Okay, so now your clients are excited because you're going to make their life easier, and you try and you go on for a certain period of time working on this project, and unfortunately, because of one reason or another, your project fails. So how is your reputation now in front of your bank customers? What will they think of you? Okay, and this is just a simple example. There are so many other examples that we can look at, right? And look at the third point: bankruptcy or loss of significant market share. So if you are, for example, working in the mobile phone or the smartphone industry now, right? And let's look at what happened a few years ago with the battery of Samsung smartphones, right? Where they were just boom going on fire, right? For a while, Samsung had a big problem. Okay, and I don't know really where they stand now, but I would like to think that they have actually managed to contain this, and that they are back with a significant market share as well. But if you look at, for example, I'm not sure how many of you know Research in Motion, or otherwise well known as BlackBerry. And for a while, for many years, BlackBerry was like, where they're like you can't even talk to them, right? They were basically, yeah, they were just the leaders, right? And because of what they maybe did a couple of times, and other reasons beside actually failed projects, they ended up basically being almost nobody. All right. And now they are trying very hard to come back. And yeah, I'm not really sure where they are. There is another point that you can see on the slide here, which is important: ripple effects on other projects. In 2010, I was working on a program which was delivering a number of projects actually at this financial institution. And part of our program was delivering a product, was delivering actually Red Hat Linux. And another business unit in the bank had two products that were relying on us delivering Red Hat Linux in certain specs on a certain date. Okay, so let's say our project was our product failed, and we were not able to deliver Red Hat Linux either on time or with the specs or with so many defects, for example. Then now we have the ripple effect on these two other projects in the other business unit, which was actually a business unit that brought a lot of income to the bank, a lot of revenue to the bank. So your failed project does not always stay within your own project, but it goes out. What about the team morale and anxiety and confusion? Now they think we are the team labeled as the one who failed this project or caused the project to fail. And, they might end up leaving the organization. And to be honest with you, this happened. Okay. There was another big project that I was working on in 2010 at this financial institution. And it was really, really a chaos project, unfortunately. And it caused one very bright resource to leave the organization, and another one to leave and go work for another organization, and another one to transfer from that department to another department so he doesn't have to work on this project. Now let's look at the bright side, the pleasure of project success. Okay, you're enjoying the winning and celebrating it. The performing organization, the stakeholders, the project manager, the team, the consultant, everybody who was associated in one way or shape or form with this project would be celebrating. On an organizational level, you have achieved the objectives and the financial, for example, the market share, reputational gains, all those benefits that were documented, whether in the business plan or in the benefits management plan, were achieved. What about, for example, I think it was in 2007 or 8 when the government wanted to merge the GST, HST together, and they basically mandated, okay, that all the financial organizations, and excuse me, I'm just using like a big term here. They had to basically work with that, and I think it was effective July or June or something like that. Now, this is a mandatory project. So imagine if, for example, one bank failed in their project to make that happen, the kind of implications that they will have. Now, looking at the bright side, achieving that means they are meeting their legal and mandatory requirements. And there is something else that we can add to this, which is, for example, audit. If you have, like, we have internal audit and we have external audit, and if that has pointed out that you need to fix these audit issues, when you have a successful project, you basically go through that. I'm just looking at the time here, and maybe I need to speed up a little bit just so we can get to, okay, we are there already. So now looking at the book, right? And I suggested here in the book 4-step process, okay? Put the brakes on the project, start the assessment first of all, find out like what is going on, okay? And then determine why the project is failing and trouble, and then try to stabilize the project and define the immediate next steps that you need to do. And then start the recovery and restore it to a useful condition. So those are the 4 steps that I proposed in my book. Let's look at each one of them. So putting the brakes on the project and start the assessment, meaning what? You need to engage key players, okay? And we're looking here at the important stakeholders that you define as key players that will actually support you in your mission trying to recover the project, okay? And we have to understand one thing, which is very, very important. If you have politics in your organization, well, then if you are actually assigned to recover a project, the politics are going to be even much more now. Why? Because people do not want to end up being pointed to as the reason, okay? So just something to keep in mind. And your success in recovering a project depends hugely on the support that you will get from your key stakeholders, where you need to build allies and supporters. Then you need to understand the politics. We just need to understand the politics, but without enraging people, without stepping on anybody's toes, okay? Because now your most important element is to gain allies and supporters. And then when you perform your assessment, you have to be very, very objective, okay? If you yourself are biased, you don't like this person and that person, you had issues with this sponsor before, doesn't matter. Put all these things aside and be very objective in your assessment, efficiently and effectively, and don't shy away from doing anything that you need to do in order to perform your assessment properly. And part of the assessment is basically having comprehensive interviews with the stakeholders. And as we all know, the project team is included in the project stakeholders. So you need to have these interviews in a way where you create a safe environment where the people, the interviewees, are not basically feeling threatened, and they can really talk freely, because what you get from these individuals is gold, is really, really gold, because they will tell you what is not in writing, what probably will never be in writing. They will tell you exactly what happened and what's going on. And they may actually share with you how you could actually recover the project. Now, that's a very important thing that you need to do. You need to be a top negotiator. You need to be very unbiased person. You need to be very objective person. And you need to smile a lot, even though you are, dealing with a difficult situation, and make people trust you and feel comfortable talking to you and feel safe talking to you. Okay. Step two. Now you need to analyze the data and then try to establish common patterns. Okay. For example, if you notice that the meeting minutes, first of all, meeting minutes are really not consistent, not there all the time. And then when you look at the content of for example, of a meeting minutes, you find that it's inconsistent. The content is inconsistent. The content is unorganized and missing items in it. In one meeting minute, the action items are captured. In the other, they are not captured. And then if you go and ask, okay, well, show me your action items log, and they tell you, what is that? I mean, I'm sorry, if they tell you what is that, yeah. So, and that, now we have to remember one thing. In the right way of doing project recovery, the project recovery manager needs to be someone who is not actually the project manager who has been working on the project, because you need a fresh view into this. The second point here, determine the project failure factors to address them. So analyze, and then you determine, and then you identify, are there any risks to project recovery and continuation? Okay, because maybe you decide after you see all these things, you look at the pros and cons, and then you decide that unfortunately the best action that we can do here is to kill the project, despite this being bad news. But you need to be very straightforward. And when you prepare your assessment report and recommendations, you might actually recommend that the project is killed. It's just no hope of this project. And that happens, unfortunately, right? In organizations where initially the project sponsor doesn't want to look bad, so he keeps throwing money on the project and trying basically to tell you, no, do more. What do you need? More resources, more resources. And at the end, it gets to a point where it's just, you can't. The project is just, and your recommendation here, and you have to do it with a strong heart, but in a very tactful and very diplomatic way, yet very, very crisp clear that you recommend that the project gets killed. Okay, and as we can see here, get stakeholder support on the assessment report. What I mean with that is a practice that we do all the time. Okay, for example, whether it's a small project or a bigger project, whether it's a project where you have a steering committee or a project where you don't have a steering committee, when you are creating your status report, whether it's weekly or otherwise, I would always discuss my status report with my sponsor one-on-one. Okay, so the sponsor is not surprised by anything, and if the sponsor doesn't like anything on it, especially when it comes to the status of the project, where it's yellow, for example, whether it is whether I'm basically showing certain risks, certain issues, or even the milestone that we have achieved. Maybe a sponsor has a certain agenda in mind, and the sponsor might change part of my status report. And if I'm going to a steering committee, the same thing as well, right? So getting stakeholder support in the assessment report here, you need a few key stakeholders, and in particular here, we're talking about the project sponsor. So what I would do, I would go to my project sponsor and I would say, I have the assessment report ready, and would you like, to recommend a few people from our key allies and the stakeholders to sit together, and we might be, 3 or 4 people, and then I will basically review the assessment report with them before we can share it with a bigger group, and hoping that there will be a go ahead to recover the project. You need to be you need to continue all the time to be objective and straightforward and strong. And now you need to reset stakeholder expectations and alignment. Why do I say that? Because initially, when the project when the project was an idea and it was like an initiative, and then it became a project charter. uh, at the time, you were one of the first things that we do when we work in initiating phase is we look at the stakeholders, right? And we make sure that the stakeholders are aware of what we are doing, and we are aware of who the stakeholders are, and basically they at that moment in time, early on in the project, they have certain expectations and certain alignment with the project. Well, now after or during step 3 here, you presented the assessment report and you were blessed, go ahead, recover the project. Well, now you need to reset the expectations and alignment of the stakeholders, make sure that they are aligned now with the new work that you have to do, and you need to create an actionable plan so you can go ahead. So the stakeholders reset here, the expectations and alignment reset is to make sure that the stakeholders are aware that now you're doing something slightly different than what a normal project would be doing. And that takes us to step number 4. Now you need to execute these concrete steps of the recovery plan, and you don't deviate. You're going to come under a lot of pressure, okay? But you have to stay strong, and you have to, as a project manager, we are leaders. So please, at this point and throughout, actually, demonstrate your leadership skills. Don't be afraid at all. Okay, be the project manager who was removed from a project. Okay, because you stuck to your principles. Okay, and you wanted to do the work that your project sponsor asked you to do, and don't worry about anything. So stay focused with the recovery end state in mind. Okay, don't mind any of the hiccups, any of the objections, any of the politics, any of the obstacles that will come your way. Don't mind that. Just stay focused. And communications. Constantly make sure that your stakeholders are aligned well with what you are doing and they are supporting you, and you answer to them, you provide them whatever communication they need, whatever information they need all the time. And you have to make sure that you do not allow any of the elements that caused the project to fail in the first place to come back again. And that's why you closely monitor the execution and always be proactive. Well, project managers, we are always asked to be proactive. For example, if we have a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, we try, and with a big group, we try to run a dry run. We call it dry run. Basically, we try to run everything ahead of time to see that everything is working. In this case, while you are executing all these concrete steps of the recovery plan, you're being always very proactive to make sure that you can, your gut feeling is working for you and telling you that, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. We might have to do something. So you are proactive, making sure at the end you are able to execute all these concrete steps that you included in your recovery plan. And just bear in mind, please, this everything is easy on paper. Okay, everything is easy. If you pick up the PMBOK or another third party book that talks about project management processes and how we can deliver successful projects and everything, on paper everything looks like a walk in the park. But we all know when it comes to executing the work, that's when we face reality. And there are so many other elements that come into picture. So this is just a suggestion of how we can recover projects. And just give you a few examples from real world. There was a program that I worked with or on at one of the banks here in Canada. And basically, the bank decided to uh, move away from another big application they used for their service desk and for also onboarding employees and something like that. So they were talking to HP at the time, and HP at the time had a product which wasn't really mature yet called Service Manager. And the bank has spent over $2 million building the business case based on HP Service Manager. And and then things were just spiraling, right? And so I was assigned to work on this. And I use the term project program interchangeably. Don't mind that, please. So I was assigned to work on this. Now, from the first moment when I was assigned, I tried to implement some of these principles that I talked to you, step one, step two, step three, and step four here. And I realized from the very beginning that this is chaos. For example, uh, almost every meeting that we had with HP, with their architect specifically, CIBC, I mentioned the name now. The bank was asking for, we need to customize this, customize that, customize this, and customize that. And the architect was almost always saying, yeah, sure, yeah, sure. And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? I mean, you're going to end up with such a product doesn't resemble the original application anymore, right? Long story short, after a while, I basically started, to document everything that I saw as wrong and as basically the cause of why we are in that situation where this project isn't moving any step further. And then I started to recommend another product which was actually in the market but not on the same scale, called ServiceNow. And it took a lot of hard work in order to recover whatever we had there and bring it to basically a different product, which is ServiceNow. And ServiceNow has been running at the bank now for many years. And actually, there is another bank, much bigger than actually the bank that I mentioned here, that ended up also adopting ServiceNow and it's part of their product. Another program that I want to share with you was at another bank in 2012, 2015. So initially the bank wanted to, it's the same thing, right? It's an IT/business project. I was a senior business program manager with this bank, and they had basically been talking to this vendor who gave them a slide showing that they can deliver the whole program in 6 months. And my first comment, actually, I said this comment in my interview. I said to the executive who was interviewing me, I said, where is this coming from? Like, is this like someone's birthday and you desire just to, deliver the project, right? I was being sarcastic with the executive during my interview. Just imagine how dare, was I? I mean, the executive could have easily told me, you know what? We don't like you. You have a big mouth. Leave. On the contrary, the executive felt at that moment, this is the right person. And I learned that later on, right? What he told, to the other senior manager that I work with, he told him right away, I felt at that moment, this is the right person that we need to get on board. Anyways, long story short, there was a lot of struggle to deal with this program, which was supposed to be delivered in 6 months and ended up being delivered in 2.5 years. Okay. And the third point, which you might face today in 2021, I was working for a technical consulting, an IT consulting company here in Richmond Hill. And one of our clients was Barnes and Noble in the United States. And what happened, I was their senior portfolio manager and basically overseeing a number of project manager. One of the first things that was obvious to me is that some of our developers wanted to work with Agile, with Scrum, while the client was working with Waterfall. And it's like, okay, how do we do this? I mean, the client is demanding the traditional items that we see in Waterfall. And, in Scrum, we do things a bit differently. And I have to say something here, although this is not about Scrum, but please help me and help yourself and help other fellow project managers to advocate for the following. Agile is, we plan in Agile. We have to, kill this myth that, oh, in Scrum you don't plan. No, we plan. We just plan differently. Anyways, back to this point here. So we had to work on a kind of a hybrid methodology where we keep our developers happy, which were partly in Canada and partly in India, and allow them to work a little bit within that Scrum way they wanted to, at the same time be able to talk to the same methodology, the waterfall that was used by our client here, Bars and Hall. So prevent project failure. The best thing naturally, so prevention is always much cheaper. And I'm sorry if I'm using the word cheap, expensive, is much cheaper, is much better, whether it is in projects, in health, or everything else. So you as a project manager, you can try to prevent project failure by doing a number of things. And if I were to summarize that, well, let's work according to our, PMP learnings, if you want. And if you are not a PMP, well, then you must have actually been exposed to certain courses, to certain training, and you understood and you agree to what is a good way of doing projects. Okay, what is a project methodology that allows you to deliver projects? If we go into a bit of a detail here, you need to be very quick in dealing with the reasons that lead to any project failure promptly and adequately, right? And the right governance is very important. The right governance allows you to very objectively ask for any artifact, for any deliverables, for anything to be in place. And one of the things that I have witnessed with some project managers, sorry, they forget that they are leaders and they shy away from doing the right thing. They are afraid, basically, of doing the right thing, of having the right conversation with their project sponsor, or having the right conversation with their functional manager who is trying to assign them a resource that is actually not a right fit at all. They just simply accept that, and many other things, right? So shying away from doing the right thing is a big problem. And unfortunately now the problem comes back to the personality of the project manager. So you as a project manager, and again, I'm not inventing anything. This is all in the teachings of the project management professional and everything that we read around that. You have to basically do what you signed up for here. And naturally, prevent project failure, and I'm saying strive to be associated with a successful project, means I'm trying basically to put some incentive here. Why, for example, should you try? Beside the pain that comes from project failure, it's a good thing to associate yourself with successful projects, whether they are on your resume, whether you are talk about them in such an event like today, or whether it's your reputation in the organization that you work with. It's very, very healthy and very good and very rewarding to be associated with successful projects. And then very quickly, we have like 1 or 2 minutes here, I think, before we have to end. These are, for example of successful projects, the Hoover Dam and the Gold Gateway Bridge, where it was delivered ahead of time, and in another case, lower than the budget. Now let's look at examples of failed project. And I'm pretty sure, and if you haven't, please read about this. The Big Dig, which was in Boston, right? And this project was delivered years late, and billions and billions and billions of dollars over budget. And at the end, actually, it caused even a car passenger in one of the tunnels to die because part of the concrete fell down because of a concrete issue. And again, I apologize, I'm not going to read word for word here. Another one is the Canadian government, the Phoenix payroll system. The government basically decided to merge, to modernize a pay system for the government employees and merge 2 other systems together with that initiative. And they were overcost, late, And unfortunately, there were a lot of failures where a lot of government employees were not paid at all for a while, or some others were overpaid for a while. So I created a big, big chaos, and that was the Canadian government. Think about it. Volkswagen and their chaos here, where they actually intentionally, okay, wanted to cheat the government emission testing by creating a computer program, software, whatever you want to call it. This was a big embarrassment for the company, and created a financial disaster because the shares went like plummeted so quickly. So as you can see here, 18 billions in fines and over $25 billion due to dive in the stock price. And now Volkswagen is the sponsor of Euro Cup, I think. Yeah. Sydney Opera House is also another, over budget and behind schedule hugely. And the Denver International Airport, this is an example of a project which was basically killed. Okay, they spent $250 million on the automated baggage system, and they saw, at the end they thought, you know what, let's go home. Nobody held accountable, to my knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Finally, this is the link to the project Janitor book on Amazon. This is my cell phone number and my email. And I thank you so much for your time. And I think at this moment we will probably open the session for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamal. I am sure I'm audible, right? Because I've taken off my headphones. Am I?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. So yes, we will move to the questions. So we do have certain questions in the chat box. The first is from Shanila Makhani. The question is, please share how the book is structured for addressing the project issues.
So the book is really structured around the 4 steps that we looked at. And I'm sorry if I'm going through quickly here. So the book is really structured around these 4 steps, and in a way also around how this presentation went. Because in the book, I basically used the small part at the beginning to basically tell you, like, why should you care? Okay, why should you care about this? Because it's important. Okay, whether it is business, psychology, whatever you want to call it, it's important for us to see the value, okay, in whatever we are being asked to engage with. And then I immediately went through these 4 steps, one at a time, detailing maybe a little bit more around each step, and maybe detailing a little bit more around the examples, while keeping the confidentiality of the organization that I referred to in my examples. So the presentation here reflects the book structure. I hope I answered the question, and if I don't, please let me know.
Shanila can wave from the video if she wants, and can write further questions if there are. Okay, perfect. So it's clear. Second question is from Zahra Khan. What had been the most challenging recovery project that you worked on?
I would say probably the one where MTORUS and IBM promised that the program will be delivered in 6 months, because there were multiple business units, including the IT department, involved in that program. And the IT department was not interested in hearing anything about what the vendor did, and they were just not interested. They were demanding from the first week a project plan, a project schedule, a project schedule. And it was like, but what kind of project schedule should we give you, right? So there was a lot of work to do there. And as I said, and we're looking at it at the moment, right? The first step here is to basically start the assessment. So for me to start the assessment and try to basically understand what is going on, while the IT executive himself was involved, and he was himself, putting the pressure on, right? So there was a lot of work that we had to do in order to maneuver that and highlight that one of the major reasons as to why they were not making any traction was this flawed project schedule that was given on a PowerPoint slide from the vendor and presented by their salespeople. You understand? Like the words I'm using here, I'm using them intentionally to just tell you how sarcastic is this. Like, what the hell? So that was a big problem, right? So it took a lot of effort and to engage uh, my sponsor and his boss, who was actually an executive vice president at the bank, and basically, count them as allies, so we can then, convince this IT executive that there is a problem here. But nevertheless, we still had to come up with something. We still had to come something, but we made sure that we reset the expectations there by, saying that this is basically what we know now, but we have to do more assessments in order to determine what is the right way to approach this. And then we went, to the step 2, step 3, step 4, and there was also a lot of resentment from the sub business units, okay, because they basically looked at whatever the vendor suggested and saw that as, well, what we have today does 100 more things and you are not capable of doing them. So why should we even adopt you? So there was a lot of negotiation and a lot of, navigation of the politics there, where we had to, work with the vendor to basically convince the vendor to customize a little bit of the product, but also work with the sub business unit in order to accept that they can't have all 100, ways of doing things, that they had to change their way itself to work with the product. So that was very challenging because of a number of reasons. One, because the vendor has promised to deliver within 6 months everything, which was totally, I don't know where they got that. Number two, because the vendor wasn't really very cooperative, unfortunately, because they felt the contract has been signed. Number three, we had multiple internal intra-organization units working with our business unit at the same time. So their interest wasn't always aligned with our interest. So there was a lot of negotiation with that. So that was really the most challenging. I was very lucky that I had my sponsor and his boss as super allies, and they were quite powerful. So that allowed us basically to navigate and deliver at the end. And as I said, instead of 6 months, we delivered in 2.5 years.
By listening to your challenging story, I can relate that to mine, which I'm going through right now in my current project. But yes, the two top bosses are in great synchronization. So it has eased a lot of us for a lot of things for us. And finally, we are going live on 19th of July, finally. So
Well,
second question is for Lian, who I am sure I am so sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Hi, Jamal, can you help to elaborate more? How did you resolve the issue that the client wanted to adopt waterfall methodology while IT project members wanted to adopt agile scrum practice?
okay. So um, as we know here, the client is the king, okay? The client is the king. And the client is paying our bills, and the client could easily say, you know what, I want to work with someone else, even though there could be a penalty, it doesn't matter, but we lose the business at the end. So that was the first mindset, okay? That was the first mindset, okay? We had to look into our own IT consulting organization to see how can we make the client happy without having to produce huge, okay? So we try to educate the client in a very customized way, whereby the main focus was to make them feel at ease, so to say, to make them feel safe that, yeah, we know what we're doing and we will be actually delivering the project to the specifications, if you want, okay, to the requirements. So what we had to do on our side is basically working with the product backlog, for example, right? We had to create a product backlog, but we created it a little bit more elaboratively versus just a regular Scrum project and a product backlog, for example. And then we shared that with the client, right? And in our presentation, we tried to align the presentation a little bit to how waterfall work, okay? Because I had the experience with both, the project management, the waterfall methodology, and as well as the agile. So I was able to interpret, like almost right real time between both. And then we basically, so that was basically the product backlog. And then we answered any questions that the client was asking, right, to make them feel even more comfortable with what we were doing. And then when, going from the product backlog into, okay, what are we doing now? For example, for the sprint length or the sprint backlog, right? We focused a lot on convincing the client over and over that we are aware of what we are delivering at the end. We are aware of that. We are focused on that. And we are also focusing on giving them value. And we tried to entice them by basically presenting that, look, instead of you waiting for 2 months for a functionality, even if it is a small one, to happen, maybe in 1 or 2 sprints, we might be able to present something, even though it's small, but it actually might be something for you. And hey, if you want to show this to other parts of the organization that are not part of the project, maybe you can brag about it a little bit. So we were playing on that, but I want to be careful here. I'm not saying playing means deceiving, but what I'm trying to say here is that we were, trying to convince the client that value works. And the client was slowly seeing the value, right, of us using Scrum and communicating with them. Notice again here, key comes to the word communications. It's how we communicated with them, and we were always accommodating. If they wanted to hear some elaboration about delivery, we were always accommodating, and we basically talked to them. So you could say that we created a little bit of a hybrid Scrum, okay? Instead of waiting only for a end of Scrum, for example, presentation, sprint presentation, we were always accommodating to the client whenever they wanted to see something, talk about something, discuss something. So it was not an easy, I can tell you this, okay? It was not an easy. What helped us, actually, a number of factors. One is the client's willingness to listen to us, give us actually a chance, and also our team's willingness and skill to customize the approach. All right. But it was ongoing work, constantly working on it, trying to make sure that it continues to work in the right direction. And we were lucky that we didn't have any like big hiccups in our delivery, which kept basically the client comfortable. Had we had maybe multiple hiccups, then maybe we wouldn't have been as successful. So a lot of factors worked in our favor. I hope this answers the question.
I think it does. So the next question is, what is the first step when we want the project recovery starts?
So the first step is to assign, it's not here maybe, but first step is to assign the recovery project manager. Okay, and again, my recommendation is that the recovery project manager should be someone else other than the current project manager, if you want. It brings a fresh perspective, fresh set of eyes. Hopefully there will be, no bias. And also the new recovery project manager there is no history between him or her and the rest of the organization, for example, or the rest of this project stakeholders. So there is a fresh start, okay? So choosing the right project recovery project manager is very critical. If you select if you select the wrong, whether it's a weak personality, whether it's someone who does not know how to negotiate, whether it's someone who is really very rough and rude and whatever, this is not going to work. This is absolutely not going to work. So you need to select the correct recovery project manager. That's the first step, in my opinion. And then going with the 4 steps that are recommended. Now, the project, the recovery manager is officially engaged, and there has to be an announcement. So to empower this recovery manager to be able to do these, and then we start basically with step 1, step 2, 3, and 4. And again, I don't mean to compare between what you see here and what we look at when we look at the 10 knowledge areas of PMBOK, for example. Absolutely not. But when we talk about the 10 knowledge areas of PMBOK and the 49 processes, we always say not every project will use the 49 processes to the same intensity. Okay, we say that because every project has different demands on these 49 processes. And the same thing I'd like to say here about step 1, 2, and 3, and 4 with whatever they entail. The recovery project manager needs to be tactful. Okay, how much emphasis to put on one step over the other, how quick to go through one step over the other, how much more time here and there, tactfully, so you can get to recover the project.
Next question is, what leading indicators do you monitor or keep track of to identify if the project has started to show the cracks, signs of failure?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. There are the subtle ones, and there are the obvious ones. Okay? The subtle ones, you feel that when you talk to your project sponsor, the conversation is really shallow. When you engage the functional manager, assuming you are in a functional organization, to get resources, you get wishy-washy resources. When you talk to your team members, you don't feel that they are engaged. They're constantly absent-minded. Okay, and then when you look at your stakeholders, as we know, we have the quadrant of how we categorize the stakeholders. For example, most powerful, most interested, least powerful, least interested, and then whatever is in between. So you see that your stakeholders are fighting like fiercely on what this project is supposed to be doing, and everyone is threatening you as a project manager with doing this, doing that. So that is all cause of concern, right? I would still qualify them as subtle, but when it comes to the most obvious ones, right? So the most obvious ones would be you try to get a hold of your sponsor, and your sponsor is totally not paying attention to you. When you talk to your sponsor about any kind of things you would like to discuss, and I use the word things, I didn't say issues, because I want to go beyond issues. Your sponsor, it's so hard to get time with your sponsor. And when you get time with your sponsor, it's like, okay, what do you want? Rush, 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 rush. So like there's a problem here, right? And now let's go to work on the project itself, right? The work on the project itself. You get a project charter that is flawed. And I'm using here the word, notice, I'm using you get a project charter, which is mostly wishful thinking. Why? Because even though in PMBOK, in PMI, and what we teach is that you should be handed the project charter in one hand and a shake hand in another and say, welcome, you are now the project manager. This doesn't happen. You are assigned and then you are told, please write the charter. So start from there. And then start now working, for example, right? If you are unable to get the resources, the functional manager are not giving you resources. But let's say they give you, but really the wrong resources. And now working with your team, trying to basically start, starting from the kickoff meeting, right? People don't attend, don't come to your meeting. And when you follow up, nobody's paying attention to you. And maybe I'm talking about severe signs, but that happens, okay? That happens. And then when you start working with your team directly and trying basically to, follow the, the planning processes here, you feel that the team is giving you the wrong information. If it comes, for example, to coming up, like you want to do the work breakdown structure, and you feel that the team members are fighting with each other on what's being, what to put on the work breakdown structure, and then the sequence. And then when it comes to estimating, okay, everybody is giving you, like one person is telling you, oh, this is going to take half a day. The other person is telling you it's going to take 5 days. Look at this gap. And unfortunately, if we're doing waterfall, we cannot use planning poker. And I do apologize if some people here are not familiar with Scrum, but this is one of the ways that we use to estimate user stories by using planning poker. So in waterfall, we don't have that, right? We might actually use, okay, Mr. or Miss team member, give me 3, give me the most optimistic, and the pessimistic, and then we have to do some magic to come up with a number. Whatever goes on in the planning. Now let's come to the execution. I'm sorry, I'm trying to hurry up a little bit to give time maybe for other questions. When it comes to execution, if your team members are not delivering, and if suddenly you see that your project budget is going to be blown out. Why? Because the initial estimations that you were given for whatever you need to procure was a certain amount, and now the vendors are demanding 150% more money from you. So you see right away that your project budget is going to be blown out. And could projects fail because of project budget, because of running out of money? Yeah, absolutely. So, and then other things you can see yourself as a project manager, meaning if you are not running efficient meetings, if you're not keeping all your logs intact, if you are not conducting effective risk management meetings, if you're not doing all these things, you yourself as a project manager, when you look into the mirror, you should go like, hey, you are leading a failed project. You should know this yourself. So I tried really to keep my answer concise, if you please, and I hope that I've given you enough as an answer to your question.
The topic is such that I guess every attendee here can relate to, every other comment that you have just mentioned. I'm pretty sure. So I guess this was the last question of the day. So with this, Jamal, thank you so very much for your time and sharing great insights of your book. It's really a very exciting and amazing experience to learn about the perspective of the book by the author himself. It's really a kind of a privilege for all of us. We would also like to thank all the attendees for making this series an exciting journey for all of us. We really appreciate your time. With this, I would like to invite our chapter president, Shanila Makhani, for the thank you note.
All right. Thank you, Jamal, for conducting today's session. I would say I think 3 months ago, when Peter introduced me and you have accepted the request in a very first email, right? Without asking a single question, how it's going to be handled, how it's going to be executed. Thank you so much, Jamal, for being part of our Readers Club. I would like to let you know, and everybody in this audience today, that we were having meet the author sessions once in a quarter last year, but this year we were privileged enough that we get the authors back to back in 4 sessions in our chapter Readers Club, and now this is something which is becoming a legacy, that we'll get another author in the next session. So thank you, Jamal, for accepting the invite, for being part of our Readers Club, and for helping us in building this community of readers who are interested in books. When I was reading about your book, Project Janitor, right, it was like someone has mentioned in the review that, if you want to stop the pain of the project, that, this book is highly recommended. The way it has been structured and the way it shows actually, that how the project needs to be recovered, how it has actually the pain points which needs to be addressed. I think it's very practical. I myself being a project manager, if I would say, I can relate to it in every project and in the things I am going through every day in my, I think, working capacity. And this is something, I agree with Rabia that, everyone among us can relate to it. Whenever you're saying everything, I was in the mask, but I was just, moving my face because this is something I can relate to. I am going through in my practical. So I think everybody here was somewhere definitely related into it. So I think a very, very practical approach and something we all can relate to, and I think we all have to opt this book, and I ordered myself at least, but it will take time to deliver from Amazon for sure. So thank you once again, Jamal, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We understand it's a weekend, it's a Saturday, right? People have joined us from Malaysia as well, where I think it's gonna be 10 p.m. maybe, but still late night or 11 p.m. might be, and still people have joined us here. So every month meeting on the second weekend, evening, sometimes at night, 11:30. Krishnan has said he's from Malaysia, and building this community and making sure that this is something which happens and we all will meet. So thank you so much everyone for making it happen and making this community, and thank you once again, Jamal, for being part of us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for making this happen. And stay strong, and hopefully you keep all your projects all the time on the successful route.
Definitely.